Hello, sister. Welcome back. I am so glad you are here today. I have a conversation for you today, right to your heart, straight to your heart, and some of the questions that you may have been asking yourself recently or at some point in the past. I know that these thoughts have crossed your mind. See, I know that there's a moment many of us have faced when the fog clears, when the adrenaline dies down, when the truth comes out. And it's a moment where we say to ourselves, what the heck did I just do? Who even am I? And you might have this feeling of shock or shame or disorientation. Like, what is going on? Like, I feel like I'm watching this movie play out. And it's like you woke up in someone else's story or someone else's skin. And honestly, you're horrified by what you've done. Maybe you feel like a hypocrite. Maybe you feel like you've ruined your family, disappointed God. You don't even recognize yourself anymore. And I want you to know you're not alone in these questions. Your story is not over. So I want to walk you through today the internal chaos and dialogue that can come after an affair, especially as a Christian woman. And we're going to look at what's happening to your identity, how shame shows up, and what God is really saying now about who you are. Hey mama, welcome to Intimacy After Infidelity. Do you find yourself Googling, can a marriage survive infidelity? Or what's the first step to divorce? Do you wake up full of hope, only to end the day with more shame when there's another stupid argument again? Hey, I'm Christina Joy, forgiven daughter of Jesus. I too felt the shame of infidelity and wished someone had a roadmap for how to get out of the mess so I could experience freedom. I kept telling myself I just needed to try harder to end the affair and fix my marriage, until I found I needed Jesus to heal some deep wounds in my heart. Through prayer, lots of research, and developing new healthy habits, I was able to find healing to shed my shame once and for all. Now I'm excited to share everything I've learned with you. So find your safe space and pop in that earbud. Let's rebuild your life and marriage better than it's ever been. Hey sister, I want to let you know right up front that if any of this resonates with you today, if you're like, yes, I'm raising my hand, identity is where I'm stuck, I wish I just had someone to see me, to hear me, to hold space for these thoughts that are swirling around in my head. If that is you, I want you to know that I do have a spot available for coaching this month. Reach out to me. Let me know. I would love to connect with you. It would be an honor to listen to your story, to help you process. There's no big commitment at all, but I know the value of just being able to talk and to just get my story out so that I get out of my own head and someone else can just walk with me into what is the next right step. So if you're interested in some one-on-one coaching with me, please reach out. Let me know. I would be honored to walk with you. So talking about identity and this question of how could I have done that? There's almost this disassociation, like disconnection, to look back, again, after the fog has cleared, to say, who did that? Surely that wasn't me. But then you start asking, what does this situation now say about me? Am I even a good person anymore? Like, what is going on? Some of my questions were, who did I turn into? Like, what did this situation do to me? Am I the only Christian wife on the planet who's ever done this? Because that's sure what it felt like. And I asked myself, is this going to mess up my kids forever? I still remember one moment where I was pregnant with one of my kids, and because of a situation with my affair, I sat in the car and I was just bawling my eyes out. I was crying, probably one of the hardest times that I've ever cried in my life. And I remember putting my hand on my belly and saying, oh Lord, is this emotional trauma going to traumatize my kid who's not even born yet? And so even from, very, very teeny tiny babies, I was very afraid that I was going to mess up my kids for the rest of their lives. And I was also asking myself, is God disappointed in me? When I stopped to picture his face, it felt like he was just pointing a finger at me and had, a stern face and a harsh tone of voice. And I thought, well, maybe this is just my consequence forever. Anything bad that happens to me from here on out, well, I'm just being punished. And this is just the hand that I have dealt myself now. I'm stuck with it forever. The punishment, the scarcity, just things not going well. It's all a consequence because of my choices, and I'm just stuck with it. I felt like I had violated everything that I believed in. I felt like a fake at work. I was in a Christian workplace. I felt like a hypocrite at church. And I wondered, as my story started to come out, I wondered if the people I loved would ever see me the same way again, or was my name, my reputation just tainted forever? And the truth is, I didn't see myself the same way, because what you're experiencing isn't just shame. Shame is a huge part of it. Shame is huge, but it's also an identity collapse. It's the death of who you thought you were. So suddenly I was grieving who I thought that I was, this good Christian church girl. And I was suddenly grieving that I wasn't that. And I was asking those identity questions of who am I now? Now, growing up, I had a black and white view of what it meant to be good versus bad. Be kind, be polite, don't judge other people, and follow the rules. All the rules. Rules like don't have sex until you're married, only ever love one man, never watch anything inappropriate on TV, get a little squirmy if there's any sort of like kissing scene. Just basically keep your record clean. Be pure, which means white. There's no hint of any dirt in there. And maybe you've heard this phrase recently called the purity culture. Christian school culture, family culture. It was all mixed together, and I never questioned it. Stay pure sexually. But what happened when I stepped outside of those rules? What happened when I crossed that line and had an affair? It wasn't just a rule that I broke. It was actually my entire identity that shattered. I didn't know who I was anymore. Because in my mind, being quote unquote good was the goal. And now that I hadn't done that, now that I had failed that rule, well, what did that make me? What did I have left? And yet, right in the middle of that pain and that shame, that is where God met me. Not with finger pointing and another lecture, but with stories of healing. Stories like the prodigal son who came home dirty, full of shame and guilt, and his father ran out to meet him. And his father never lectured him. His father never pointed a finger at him and said, "How dare you?" In fact, his father threw him a party and loved him. And I also think of stories like the woman at the well, John chapter 4. She had 5 failed relationships, and Jesus chose to meet her for her to bring the good news to the city that she was in. Jesus offered her the living water and restored dignity. And I also think of stories like King David and Bathsheba. He committed adultery and murder, and he was still the author of the Psalms that cried out for God's mercy. And when he cried out, he received it. So I remember journaling through all these different scriptures and just asking, why me, God? I remember I was reading Psalm 23, you've prepared a table before me. You've anointed my head with oil. Like I'm your honored guest. And I remember reading that and saying, me? I started crying. God, why would you choose me? Why are you still here for me? Why are you choosing to rescue me? But I sat in that and I asked those questions and I learned how to begin receiving that love, that honor, that dignity. And slowly, there's no timeline, but slowly with counseling and coaching and church, I heard a different voice, a gentle and a loving one that said, this is not the end of you. This is where I begin something new. So one of my biggest shifts came when I realized shame was no longer my identity. The Bible talks about shame like clothing, something that you can wear or something that you can take off. And slowly I began to shed it. I was going to shed my shame. And so instead of wearing that label of broken or unworthy or hypocrite, I started feeding myself truth. And I repeated these things to myself every single day, multiple times throughout the day. I would tell myself things like, I am loved. I am a work in progress. I'm not perfect yet. I'm coming home to my Father. I'm a woman of integrity. I am God's precious daughter. And these weren't just wishful thoughts. They were identity statements that were based in Scripture. And it wasn't, I took it to the next level. It wasn't just quoting a verse like exactly how Scripture says it. You know, you are loved, you are chosen, all of these. I took time to create sentences, these affirmations, if you will, from what I needed to hear. They were still truth rooted in Scripture, but something like, I am coming home to my Father. I took the truth of Scripture and I applied it to words that meant a lot to me in the moment. So I'd encourage you to do the same. And again, that's something that we can talk about even in coaching. What is the truth that your soul needs to hear right now so that you can continue to get an accurate picture of who God is and who God says that you are? Now, if we were sitting together, having a cup of coffee, chatting, and we were sitting across the table and you just said, Christina, am I even a good person anymore? I would immediately think of the verse, 2 Corinthians 5:21. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Sister, you're not just good, you are righteous. You are the righteousness of God, not because of what you've done, but because of what Jesus did. God is not waiting to punish you. He's waiting to restore you. You are currently in right standing with him. That is your identity. And you get to choose whether you live in that. These aren't just nice words. These are the truth statements. You are currently in right standing with God. And it's up to you if you accept that and believe that and live that out. You are more than what you've become. You are his precious daughter. I often think of the quote from the scene in The Lion King where Simba is struggling with his identity. You know, Rafiki smacks him over the head with his staff and he goes and talks to his father Mufasa in the clouds. And Mufasa says to him, Simba, you have forgotten who you are and so forgotten me. Look inside yourself. You are more than what you have become. And that's you. You are not the worst thing that you've done, and you are not stuck in shame. This is your invitation to come home. Come home to God. Come home to yourself. Come home to the woman that you are becoming. So before we go, I want to leave you with something to maybe journal, to think about this week. What do I believe this moment says about who I am? So when I think about the affair, when I think about, all the things that I wish had never happened, what am I making that say about me? And how is that contrasted with what God says instead? So compare those two. Where do you see truth And where can you identify a story that you're telling yourself that might not actually be true? Be kind. Speak the truth to yourself just like you would to your daughter or to a best friend. And I would love to hear about it as well. If you have some thoughts coming up about your identity, I would love to hear what you're thinking. Come share it in our free Facebook community where we are sharing together. We're walking through the grief and the shame and the healing. I'll have that link for you in the show notes. And like I said, if you feel like coaching, working with me one-on-one is the next right step, let me know, and I would love to connect with you in a personal and intimate way. Sister, you are not alone. You are deeply loved, and you are God's precious daughter. Now, I pray that you live in that this week.